We're back with our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary, and we're seeing a final rush of voting right now as polling places are about to close across most of the state. We have our correspondents at key voting sites. First, let's go to Evan McMorris-Santoro. He's in Nashua for us. Evan, I understand a lot of new voters where you are?
Yeah, Wolf, hi. I'm at the Nashua's 3rd Ward polling place. And one of the things about New Hampshire is that people who can just show up here and vote if they want to. If they're not registered, they can come here and register. And we've seen that be very, very popular here at this polling site. In fact, earlier, this area over here where new voters come was completely packed. They had to call in more people to come and help register voters. We've had about 300 new voters here already today, and we're not done voting yet.
Very interesting. Let's go to Athena. Athena Jones is at a polling place in Manchester. Athena, what are you seeing over there? What about turnout?
Hi, Wolf. Well, very similar to what you heard from Evan. This is Manchester's Ward 12. We're at an elementary school that's been slow and steady throughout the day. About half of the folks registered to vote at this polling location have come out to vote. But look behind me. This crowd behind me, these are folks who are waiting to register to vote in this ward for the first time. We just spoke to some of the moderators here. This number, the number of newly registered voters, is approaching 400. That's almost 10% of the number of people who were already registered to vote. So a big jump in turnout for new voters who are waiting patiently here to fill out the form so they can go over and vote. Now, I spoke to about 90 people here over the course of the day. That's, of course, a small sampling of the more than 2,500 who have voted, but it's anecdotal. But among that group, there was big support for Bernie Sanders, for Pete Buttigieg, and among the other names mentioned most frequently were Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden. So a lot of support for Buttigieg and Sanders, but support for others as well. Those supporting Sanders most frequently cited his authenticity, his consistency, and the fact that he hasn't wavered in his policy positions over the last 40 years. I also talked to several folks in the healthcare industry. We've been talking about how healthcare is one of the biggest issues on voters' minds. Several of them, a registered nurse, a pharmacist, a resident, a doctor, a person studying to be a doctor, all cited Bernie Sanders' support for Medicare for all. So that was a big theme. People who cited Pete Buttigieg talked about his energy and his youth. Wolf?
All right, Athena, thanks very much. Only about 14 minutes or so till the polls close in most of New Hampshire. In the meantime, let's get some more exit poll results. David Chalian is joining us.
Wolf, we have some clues here about how this race may go tonight that I think are really important to pay attention to because it's a dramatic change from what we've seen in the past. It's about when voters decided who they were going to vote for. Look at this. 48% of voters today in the New Hampshire Democratic primary say that they just decided in the last few days. 4 years ago, that number was 25%. In 2008, it was 38%. This is an electorate that is dynamic. It remained very undecided until late, which means late-breaking developments in the last few days have real impact. We asked about the debate on Friday night, and that number is huge as well. 48% say that debate is a big factor in their vote. That's an enormous amount just in these last 72 hours, as Amy Klobuchar has been doing well, as closing messages from the campaigns, as the battle between Biden and Buttigieg was getting underway, and Sanders and Buttigieg. Voters tuned in and started making up their minds very late. That is going to have an impact on what we see in the results tonight. Anderson?
David Chalian, thanks very much. I want to talk to our panel about the push and pull between the progressive argument for the Democratic Party and I guess what you would say the more moderate side of the Democratic Party. Will there be any more clarity by the end of tonight?
No.
Once results are in?
I don't think anybody knows anything. I don't think we're getting any closer to being figuring this thing out. I don't think we're getting any more clarity.
You've just given up.
I'm not giving up. This is exciting.
It's impossible to know anything.
We don't know anything. No, I think that's refreshing. I think viewers know that we're just trying to be honest, and we just don't know much coming into the night. We've had, after tonight, 2 of the 57 states and territories that award delegates would have voted, which means we have a long way to go. They're now throwing real elbows. You see Pete and Bernie Sanders sniping at each other about who can pay for what and where they are. The lanes are all muddled. I'm not sure that every Warren voter will vote for Bernie Sanders and vice versa. So I think tonight what you're going to see is someone's going to come out with a little momentum. How they have an infrastructure in place to capitalize on that is important. And one more thing I have to point out. One of the things we always laugh at the fact we're having all of these debates, but debates actually matter. Yeah. And this next debate in Nevada is going to be the biggest debate we've had to date.
Also,
Because-
Kirsten, what we haven't heard from is a lot of. Well, actually, I'm not even sure. I forgot what I was going to say.
The one thing I was going to say is that I think what's interesting was shown earlier in the exit polls was this liberal moderate debate, right? You know, they said 58% of people in New Hampshire said they're perfectly fine with getting rid of private insurance and having assume Medicare for all, and 67% said they support free tuition in public college. And so we've heard a lot about how Bernie Sanders is so wildly out of touch with the Democratic electorate. Well, that's not actually true. The thing is, this isn't actually what a lot of people are voting on. What they're voting on is whether or not you can beat Donald Trump. And so that's what this all comes down to. And that's why these New Hampshire and Iowa do matter. I take the point that it's not representative of the overall electorate, but they do matter because it's starting to show people who can organize an election and who can win. And that does play into people's thinking when they start to think, like, is this somebody
Bernie Sanders has also brought the entire Democratic Party from where he was, you know, what people said about him 4 years ago to now.
In 2016, just to boost Kirsten's point, in 2016, when Bernie Sanders would talk about Medicare for all and getting rid of private health insurance entirely, there would be like eye roll and like, oh, there goes Bernie again.
Yeah.
In 2020, you've seen, now, many of them have had fraught relationships with, but you've seen, broadly speaking, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, generally speaking, embrace it. That has been the cut line, but you've seen a lot more movement leftward. Some of that's Trump, not all of it's Bernie, some of it's Trump. But I don't think there's any the other thing, too, is the whole electability thing. I just wonder about, because I look at polling, it's February, I look at polling about the general election, and by and large, Biden runs the best across the same number of states. But it's not as though Bernie Sanders is behind by 15 points. Most of the data that I see is he's ahead or competitive. Is he exactly where Biden is? No. So electability thing, Donald Trump was, if we were all here, if you asked me who's more electable, the governor of Ohio with a proven voting record of winning in a swing state in the general election, or Donald Trump. Donald Trump would have been 16th on the most electable.
But let's just not forget that actually Bernie's leading the Q poll, and Joe Biden cut his support among African Americans almost in half.
Well, it was Michael Bloomberg that cut the support from Joe Biden among that. And to your
You're
point,
only the most electable until votes are actually cast, and people realize actually you may not be.
Exactly, and what Bakari started to say was that this debate that's coming up is going to be super important because Michael Bloomberg will actually be on the stage for the first time, and everybody will have a chance to
I'm just going to suggest this to you. My father, I grew up in a Democrat community. I understand it. If you think you're going to go to these voters in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and say, I'm going to take away your private insurance, but don't worry, I got a government program for you. Are you kidding me? Well, and here's the other thing I want to tell you about New Hampshire. It's the only last thing I want to say. When I watch this, all I want to know is about what Bob Dole used to call the big mo. Where's the momentum? And where does that momentum go? And does it carry somebody on? So if Amy does well, does that momentum carry her over to Nevada? Does it carry her into South Carolina? But the question is, it's about momentum coming out of New Hampshire.
You cannot.
Intention.
I will continue to say this. This race does not truly form itself until black people.
But nobody's saying it has.
No, I'm just saying. But I'm just saying that we have to flesh out a vision because we can talk about Bernie Sanders, we can talk about Elizabeth Warren, we can talk about Amy Klobuchar, but they have still yet to prove that they can overcome that hurdle. And when we're talking about this, and you brought up the Q poll, and that's what made me think about this. You have Michael Bloomberg, who is now running into his own issues because for a period of time, I always told people that Michael Bloomberg is going up. He's going up the rough side of the mountain. But now we see, while he was mayor of New York, he wasn't even forthright enough to give African-American men the benefit of their humanity. So he will now have to deal with these things like everybody else. And I think the race will reshape going into it.
But you also have to admit that there is something to do. Momentum does play a role in these races.
No
So
doubt.
that's the only point I think people are making. I don't think anybody's saying.
I'm just cautioning us.
I also want to address what you just said, though, about, if you think X will happen when you talk to these voters. It reminds me of Donald Trump, frankly. If you think a Republican voter is going to vote for somebody who attacks the Bush family, who opposes the Iraq War, who supported Hillary Clinton, boy, do you have something coming. Well, guess what? we know what happened. So,
but that's to Bakari's point about lanes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have a tendency to think about things in lanes. Oh, it's the moderate lane, the conservative. Donald Trump. No, that doesn't mean the Democratic primary will, but he shattered all. The evangelicals supporting a guy with Donald Trump's background who said the things Donald Trump has said. I mean, he shattered the lane thing. There's a conservative lane and a moderate lane.
Well,
I don't know where
shattered,
he fits
though.
there.
I mean, to your point about health care, he has also shattered this week the commitment that he made to not cut Medicare, Medicaid. He introduced a budget that had almost $2 trillion worth of cuts to health care and cuts to Social Security. So if Democrats don't take advantage of that, regardless of whether you're Medicare for all or not, that to me is a much bigger sin than saying to people that eventually you're going to be on a public health care
Let me
system.
commit one further cardinal sin here. If the Democrats had nominated anybody but Hillary, who the Republicans had demonized for 25 years, Donald Trump wouldn't have won. And it was a unique time because, look, the media was covering Donald Trump's. They had an empty podium, and they were covering him for every one of these town halls.
That is true.
This was one time just unusual in American political history. It's so
You
different.
think it's entirely anomalous?
I think that a large part of it is.
Thank you.
Because it's sort of like his party now. Because you know what they're saying. Well, we got some good judges, but we don't care about the debt. We don't care about immigration.
Yes,
we don't
that's
care
what
about
they're saying.
It's weird.
That's what they're saying.
It's going to change.
While we're talking about this Democratic primary, I think that we have to understand that voters. There are 62 million voters in this country who voted for Donald Trump.
Yep.
I'm not so certain that all of that was economic anxiety. I know that the governor will push back on me on that.
I'm with you.
But there were a lot of voters who decided to set aside racism, bigotry, xenophobia, misogyny, etc., and still voted for Donald Trump. I do think that Democrats, we have to get our act together and we have to build excitement all across the country in order to beat what we know is going to be at least 62 million voters out there. And Hillary Clinton did a damn good job.
You can't beat them by just trashing Donald Trump. You have to have something that's going to get people pumped up and excited.
We are about to get the first votes in tonight's pivotal Democratic primary. Most New Hampshire polling places close at the top of the hour, about 5 minutes from now. Stay right here for all the results.
Sail beyond with Celebrity Cruises. Beyond expected. Beyond luxury. For a